Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being with us here today. My question to start with will be for Dr. Looney. Dr. Looney, the administration doesn't seem to understand some of these most basic terms. Is it possible for a student loan to actually be forgiven?
Thanks, Representative. I mean, it's forgiven to the student, but obviously someone else will pay.
Yeah, I call it the student loan transfer scheme. Like you said, it may be transferring that debt from the borrower to those who did not borrow it. In your testimony, you highlight that under the Biden administration's new income-driven repayment plan, borrowers will only pay 63 cents for every dollar that they borrow. Would you classify that as a repayment plan?
Well, clearly under that policy, many borrowers will not repay their loans.
Yeah, I worked in the lending industry for 17 years before coming to Congress, and 63 cents on the dollar would not be a repayment plan. So how would you characterize that as instead of a repayment plan when they're only paying 63 cents on average on the dollar?
It is more like a grant program, but a grant program that's not based on income or program, but basically how much you borrow.
Talk about a failed business model. Any private lender would go out of business very quickly if they extended loans with the expectation that you'd only collect 63 cents back on the dollar. That would be a terrible, unprecedented default rate. The administration also doesn't seem to understand the term emergency, since the authority that they're claiming, the legal authority they're claiming to transfer the student loan debt to non-borrowers is from the national emergency status of COVID-19 and the Higher Education Relief Opportunities for Students Act of 2003, which was meant to provide, as you know, temporary leave to military members during the deployment following 9/11. I know you're not an attorney, but do you think the administration has any real legal grounds for doing this under these so-called emergency provisions?
Are you asking me if I think that
do you think they have any legal authority to do this under these two pretenses?
I'm going to leave that to the Supreme Court to decide.
Well, I'm going to tell you they certainly don't have that legal authority. I certainly believe the Supreme Court will overturn that. So who is benefiting most from this so-called forgiveness, which is really, again, the student loan transfer scheme? Who's benefiting from that?
Well, it's clear that the beneficiaries of the program are well-educated. They're individuals who have had the opportunity to go to college. That's typically individuals who have come from more affluent backgrounds. They go on to have well-paying careers on average, and because the program is virtually untargeted, the benefits are widely spread across borrowers.
Yeah, the student loan transfer scheme, or the vote-buying scheme, you might say, since it was announced right before the last election, is disproportionately positively impacting higher income individuals, graduate degree recipients. But what is the impact on those who did not go to college or worked their way through college or already paid off their student loans? What is the impact on them? Taxpayers across the country who fit one of those categories, I should say.
Well, I mean, this will cost close to $1 trillion, and so obviously that will increase the national debt. Mark Goldwine just testified that it will increase inflation and increase interest rates, and so those costs are imposed on all Americans.
What do you think about the administration continuing to extend student loans even while they're trying to excuse borrowers from paying existing student loans?
Well, I mean, clearly it's a policy that has encouraged students to take out more loans and to repay them more slowly, and so that has increased and will increase the amount that students owe.
You can understand why an ambitious, well-intended, productive citizen who was trying to pay off their student loans early or beyond the amount that they're required to pay might think they might be a chump for paying off their student loans if the administration's going to continue to transfer or follow through with their scheme to transfer that debt to those who didn't borrow it. Since you mentioned Mr. Goldwine, in your testimony you said no president should distribute upwards of $1 trillion without explicit congressional authorization input. Can you help explain to our constituents, my constituent in Virginia, how unprecedented this executive action is and help put that number in context, $1 trillion?
Well, the largest executive action I'm aware of to date cost $200 billion.
Wow.
So we're talking about across all these executive actions, it's close to $900 billion just under this administration.
Incredible. So that $1 trillion or $900 billion is approximately $3,000 per U.S. citizen, or a family of four, $12,000 per household with 300 million, a little bit more than that, Americans. how many Americans would, in a survey, would vote to support them incurring personally a share of $3,000 per citizen or $12,000 per family of four, do you think?
I don't know, but they are incurring the cost because this benefits 13% of Americans. The other 87% are paying higher prices at the grocery store for their rent, and they're going to be paying higher mortgages, higher car loans, and at being at risk for a recession.
Yeah, well said. You know, what are the, I think there's a failure on my friends on the other side to understand the consequences of our debt, ignoring the debt, pretending that it doesn't exist, and leaving this legacy of debt. Not just the inflation that it's causing today, as you've referenced, but what it will cost our children and our grandchildren in the future. And I yield back, Mr. Chairman.